This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good evening and happy half term to everybody who's listening. It's the 29th of May and you've joined your late host, Kari Anson. And tonight I'm going to be talking to Sarah Johnson and we find out all about the success of achieving 10,000 signatures on the recent petition for assessing blue badges for under
This
threes.
is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, good evening, everybody.
You've been listening.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to anybody who's listening. You may recall that the Late Show, this is my second trial, and the first time we had major technical issues. So the fact that we're 1 minute past 9, we're live and we're broadcasting with sound, I think we'll take that as a win. Tonight, I'm going to be joined by Sarah Johnson. Now, Sarah is an educator. She has got qualified teacher status and's been in education for over 20 years. And the settings in which she's got that experience are mainstream, pupil referral units, alternative provision, and psychiatric inpatient services. She is an accomplished and published author, and she's a member of the Department for Education's Alternative Provision Stakeholder Group, where she has supported policy development on the green papers for SEND and alternative provision. However, tonight we're welcoming her to share her journey as a parent of children with additional needs. So, good evening, Sarah. Are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. That's great.
Fantastic. We're there then.
Oh, yeah, we are. That's brilliant. So we're just going to invite listeners as well. If any listeners want to dial in or message in throughout the show, just feel free and feel welcome. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about your family? Because Astrid and Iris, over the past sort of week to 10 days, they've managed to capture the hearts of lots of individuals, haven't they?
They have, probably not so much if you saw them have a tantrum this afternoon before bedtime. Yes, I've got 4 children. I have my 14-year-old Octavia, and then I had somewhat of a gap, and then I had my twins Ashton and Iris, who are 2.5, and I have Zelda, who joined us quickly afterwards, and she is 16 months old. The 3 babies, Astrid, Iris and Zelda, actually all have disabilities. So whilst I started the petition in context of Astrid and Iris, actually the likelihood is that Zelda, my youngest, also has disabilities.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks very much for joining us tonight. And the reason I invited you as a guest is because I am a head teacher of a special school and very passionate about sort of equality and diversity in all forms of life. And what struck me is I'd seen you share on social media about the challenges that you and your family had faced in regards to getting access to a blue badge. With the rules being that only under 3s can have a blue badge in exceptional circumstances. So do you want to share with us and tell us all why your girls were deemed as if they didn't meet the criteria?
So, interestingly enough, when I first applied for a blue badge for the twins, I recognised that they didn't meet the strict criteria. And the criteria as it stands is appropriate in terms of children that might need quick access to hospital, bulky medical equipment and so on. But then Astrid was given what's called a K-walker, which is medical equipment in order to help her stand and move from one place to another. So what I thought is when Astrid was prescribed a K-walker, what that would mean is that she would meet the criteria in regards to bulky medical equipment. So on that note, I reapplied for a blue badge for Astrid only, recognising that, and I was told that it wasn't bulky medical equipment. When I asked exactly what was it then, it was the kind of viewpoint was that I could put the girls in a pram, and that's why they wouldn't be entitled to it. So from that perspective, Kent County Council were adding sort of different extra and special criteria relating to it. Lots of people have given advice, and I've followed it all. So, for example, my MP was involved, Adam Holloway, wrote messages to Kent County Council. My health visitor wrote a very strong letter about why it was unsafe for me to get in and out of the car with Astrid and Iris in particular, who couldn't stand particularly well. If they fall to the floor, they can't get up from the floor without crawling to a hard surface to try and pull themselves up and so on. But still, I was told no. And then I actually reapplied for a blue badge for Zelda. A couple of days ago, Kent County Council said that I should reapply for Zelda because she might be entitled, because Zelda has never eaten food, for example. She's 16 months old. She has a gross developmental delay. She's needed several hospital admissions, and she needs very frequent admissions into hospital. And they fast-tracked it, to say no yesterday, which I did point out. Why did you bother suggesting that I reapply? Because it's just a waste of my time, essentially. So, so I thought, well, I'm not going to fight for my twins in that way, because I'm just getting angrier and angrier, and I wasn't getting any further. So I decided to become dispassionate about it and just try and make a change nationally for people, and took away that kind of personal focus, which has helped me enormously. So I started the petition, and it was kind of rocking along, doing okay, until the government announced that actually any petition would be closed just after midnight tonight, and they probably maybe won't look at it anyway, regardless. So from that, I took to Twitter and sort of expressed my kind of frustration. And I can't remember how many people had signed it by that point. I think about 6,000. But
it was
I've got so many over a few hours. It was unreal. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, it was when I'd originally signed it when you first shared it, because I follow quite closely you on Twitter. Not that I'm a stalker or anything, but it's just that you have so much to give. So you give so much professionally, but then also from a parent's perspective, you give so much from a parent's perspective. So I always do have a little, stalk and watch. And I think when I looked that evening, it was about 6,700. And I'm really pleased that the band of Twitter education professionals, etc., all together started sharing and making sure it got signed, so that we got over the 10,000. Just going back to some of those reasons, I work in a school with children with complex medical needs and lots of physical difficulties. And to think about the K-walker as not being bulky, you try saying that to families like yourself, and also to schools, who, you might have 3 or 4 children in a class who have got that equipment, but as well, they've got the standing frames and possibly a chair as well. So the fact that it's not deemed as bulky, I'd be really interested in Kent's definition as to what is bulky.
Or perhaps that it's not medical equipment, that maybe my daughter Astrid is just using it for fun. And actually, both Astrid and Iris use a K-walker. We've got 2. The reason why Iris wasn't prescribed one initially is because she was quite grumpy when the physiotherapist came round and refused to use it, but now she does. And she does need it for going outside if there's any kind of change of path, textures, or going up like little kind of bumps and things like that. So she does use it, and it does help her. So imagine you've got a classroom of maybe 3 or 4 children with K-walkers. Well, I just had my living room with K-walkers of 2 of them, plus potentially Zelda in the future, but I'm not quite sure what her future will hold at the moment because she doesn't pull to stand. But yeah, the idea that it's not bulky, and that I can just put them in a pram is a nonsense, but it also restricts them enormously. It is really important, for example, that if I go and get their feet measured for shoes, that they have to be able to stand, which means I have to take the pram and the K-walkers. Or if I take them to the park, well, clearly I'm going to take the K-walkers because they want to move around the equipment. They don't want to be stuck in a pram whilst experiencing a playground. That doesn't make any sense. And it's that kind of lack of insight, I think, from the council in really considering the family's needs, but also the multiple disabilities in the family becomes incredibly challenging.
Well, we're on half term now. I've been to the park myself today, and it's quite interesting because I was having a look at the accessibility of the playground. I was over in East Leek in Nottinghamshire,
Okay.
and I was just having a look and thinking, actually, the accessibility and the inclusion of some of the pieces of equipment, if you are disabled, what is there for you? So, for example, there was absolutely nothing if you were a wheelchair user at all. So, thinking about accessibility within your local community, how do you find that? Do you find that some places are quite restricted, or do you find that you've got some really good local spaces that the girls are able to access?
I think, in all honesty, we've got a really nice garden. So we kind of stick to the garden, and we've put our own kind of equipment that's accessible for the girls in that regard. I went to a park that I took my older daughter to for many, many years, and it's got a small section that's for kind of babies, which actually is very good for Astrid and Iris and Zelda as well. I would say, generically speaking, they are not particularly accessible. Really, much of them, which is why we don't really go to them. And even things like swimming, because we're meant to take the girls swimming to help with their hypotonia, which means muscle weakness. That actually, I can't. I can't take the girls swimming because they can't stand on any wet floor whatsoever. And it's the same with a playground. If a playground gets wet, and in England it's quite frequent, they'll just fall over. So it's not really accessible for them particularly.
Oh gosh, so that must be well, very fortunate for the girls that they've got you as parents that are able to provide a garden. I know that I work in a city, Birmingham, and many of our families, or quite a few of them, live in flats, and
Yeah,
we're having to support our families with housing applications to try and support getting them housing where it can be accessible for their children and young people. So in the garden, so what do the girls like doing? What's their favourite things? Let's find out a little bit more about what they're interested in.
well, Astrid and Iris really like food. And they've got a little playhouse that we got for free because somebody had left it outside their house and asked for people to take. So they've got a little playhouse that they love, and they like going in and out of the playhouse, um, and they just sort of natter to each other. And they like books, so they like sitting in the garden reading books and going in and out of the playhouse and taking toys off each other and shouting a lot. And Zelda really likes crisp packets, really likes the texture of them, and will hold them forever and a day. So she's quite
Oh,
easy to entertain, to be honest.
and the sensory sound as well. To be fair, crisp packets do make a great sound, don't
Mm.
they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
she
yeah.
loves it. She loves that kind of crunchy, crunchy noise, and she will hold on for it for ages. She loves it.
Oh, well, it's great to hear about the girls. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little break now for the news for this week. So, listeners at home, you've got the opportunity to get yourself a cuppa and then settle back in. Because then, Sarah, when we come back, we've talked about the girls and their likes, dislikes, and I always think of a social model of disability. But then, if we start to think about, that medical, so what it was, the telltale signs for you that made you think, well, hang on, something's different to Octavia, and then you can share with us your plans into making the journey for families who get a diagnosis much easier. Because I've seen that you're willing to share with families. You posted it tonight on Twitter, didn't you? Those great illustrations in guiding families as to all the information they're going to need. So
Absolutely.
everybody, Everybody go and get yourself a cuppa and then come back to settle in and take a listen to the news.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MATS leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
According to FE Week, Sir Ian Buckham, the interim head of exams regulator Ofqual, is Gillian Keegan's preferred candidate to take on the role permanently. The role of chief regulator will only be confirmed by whoever forms the next government. The current Education Secretary chose to appoint an interim chief regulator for a year after Dr. Joe Saxton stepped down to head up UCAS. Sir Ian began the role in January and Ms Keegan has put him forward for the full-time role, following approval from the Prime Minister. However, Sir Ian's pre-appointment hearing with the Parliamentary Education Committee will not take place until after the recently announced general election on July the 4th. It leaves a potential new government facing the decision on whether to keep the current Conservative-approved candidate or find an alternative. The Indian Business Standard News website explores the reasons for a drop in numbers of Indian students choosing the UK as their higher education destination. 21,000 fewer master's degree applicants have registered than in previous years, according to official figures. Anuj Gupta, CEO of Young Rads, said that Indian students are now hesitant to apply due to stricter visa regulations. Gupta went on to point out the financial impact this could have on UK institutions, as they rely heavily on tuition from international students. The article goes on to suggest that the British government has prioritised curbing migration over university student numbers. The article goes on to point out that many Indian students are now considering countries like Germany, which offers a combination of world-class universities, minimal tuition fees, and a low visa rejection rate. In Wales, the BBC reports again on measures some head teachers are taking to save cash as budget squeezes continue. A primary head teacher in Pembrokeshire is reported to be moonlighting as his school's caretaker, seeing to day-to-day maintenance, testing fire alarms and water hygiene, alongside teaching and headship itself. Many other schools are responding by cutting jobs. According to the report, the Welsh Government said its budget was £700 million less in real terms than when it was set by the UK Government in 2021. Councils have confirmed to BBC Wales News that nearly 200 schools have been discussing redundancies in 2024, with cuts largely directed to welfare and support services in schools. The BBC also reports on an open letter sent by head teachers from schools across St Albans to parents. The letter calls on parents not to let their children have a smartphone before they are 14. St Albans Primary Schools Consortium urged parents to wait until Year 9 at secondary school before giving them a device. In it, the letter talks of how the devices could expose children to a number of risks, and that whilst it was understandable that phones could give parents peace of mind, children's phones do not need to have access to the internet in order for you to keep them safe. TeacherTapp's survey tool published data last January that suggested only 1% of schools had no restrictions in place at all on phones in schools. But the topic remains a cause for concern, especially as smartphones are now a feature of daily life for most adults, and that some children as young as year 1 have access to such a device. Finally, a West Yorkshire MP is calling for children to be taught about endometriosis in schools. The condition, which can cause chronic pain, affects about 1.5 million women in the UK, according to figures from charity Endometriosis UK. MP Sir Alex Shelbrooke said he had been shocked by the lack of education surrounding the condition. The Department for Education said new RSHE curriculum proposals included the addition of lessons on menstrual and gynecological health, including endometriosis, polycystic ovary syndrome, and heavy menstrual bleeding. Sir Alex said both girls and boys should learn about all aspects of reproductive health. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Late Late Show with your host this evening, Kari Anson. Tonight we are joined by our guest, Sarah Johnson. We have got some listeners out there who are sending messages into the show saying how much they're enjoying it. So thanks very much, Nikki. It's great that the technology is working this time. We're all live and broadcasting. Great to see coaching head teacher. Great to see Honken. So, yep, do feel free to send those messages in. So tonight's guest is Sarah Johnson, who is an accomplished individual both professionally and personally. And tonight we're talking about her children and some of her experiences after their diagnosis of cerebral palsy. So to just bring the listeners up to speed, cerebral palsy, it's a group of neurological disorders that can affect muscle tone, movement and motor skills. And it's caused by a brain injury or an abnormality that occurs before, during, or immediately after birth. People with cerebral palsy typically have poor muscle coordination and difficulty controlling certain body movements. However, some people have more disabling symptoms than others. The effect of cerebral palsy can be as mild as a limp or extensive paralysis of the legs and hands, possibly speech impairments, and sometimes it can also be coupled with intellectual disability. The treatment for cerebral palsy may include some speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, to think about improving the physical functioning and ways in which to learn and accomplish the daily tasks. And sometimes medications can be used, which can support any digestive problems or mood disorders. There's lots of use for assistive devices for mobility and communication, and seeing and hearing can sometimes be part of that treatment. And most with cerebral palsy live right the way through to adulthood, and it doesn't prevent anybody from desiring and living a full life and reaching their potential. So, Sarah, you had Octavia, who's now 14. So,
Yes.
so parenting, you'd been there, you'd been on that rodeo, and then along came Astrid and Iris. So, what was it for you that in parenting Astrid and Iris that you thought, oh, hang on, things are a little bit different than they were with Octavia?
So I think there was a couple of different clues. One of which was Astrid's is quite obviously cross-eyed, so her eyes look in different directions. She has a double squint. That was the first thing, but I didn't think cerebral palsy then. The other thing was I noticed that they had delayed milestones, both of them, in particular Astrid. So they were late to crawl, late to pull to stand, very late to walk, and obviously still struggle considerably. And their speech pattern, their speech was very, very difficult to understand, didn't have any words, but could understand everything. And I think with Astrid in particular, what made me think of cerebral palsy was that she started commando crawling, but not using her left side properly. But also, I wasn't sure, but it looked like she had less control over her left eye as well. But I wasn't sure about that. So that's what I brought up initially to the health visitor and to the GP, was those kind of late milestones, but also having the double squint and also the left side weakness, which made me think of hemiplegia, which is cerebral palsy that affects one side of the body. That was my biggest concern. And then when they were able to pull to stand, I could see that their feet weren't right. Is the best way of putting it. Obviously had quite significant issues with their feet called bilateral calcum valgus, which is kind of deformed foot posture, I suppose.
Wow, so there were sort of quite a few telltale signs. Now,
Yeah.
in your experience as a professional, so the 20 years in education, in any of your settings, had you ever experienced students who had a diagnosis of cerebral palsy?
Yes, students, but also friends, people that I would consider friends with cerebral palsy as well. So yes, a number of students with cerebral palsy, in particular. Sorry, coughing away. In particular, hemiplegia. Sorry, I'm just going to cough for a moment. You might want to mute me.
Yeah, that's she's making the assumption here, everybody, that I have the technological skills to mute, but
That's okay.
I think I've
managed to get my cough out of my throat. Apologies, that wasn't very good radio, was it? So yes, I had worked with children with cerebral palsy, hemiplegia, diplegia, a whole range actually. And a number of years ago, people might have remembered that I raised funds for a young lady called Lucy, for her to purchase eye gaze technology because a local authority had refused to give it to her. So I hope Lucy doesn't mind me saying this. I consider her a friend. She's absolutely lovely, and she sometimes WhatsApps me as well. So I've got a fair amount of experience with cerebral palsy. I wouldn't consider myself an expert at all, but I had the broad knowledge to understand that some of the things that my children were demonstrating was perhaps going towards that area.
Oh, well, how fortunate for them, because I suspect that there are many early years settings and nurseries, etc., that sometimes are the first people to possibly have that conversation, or even possibly health visitors thinking about, your 2-year development check, etc. Was it you that identified these things, or did anybody else within the medical professional sort of, bring it to your attention?
No, it was me that brought it to their attention, and had to, which I've been quite public about, quite prolific pushing to get them seen by a paediatrician. I was told initially, for example, it was going to be a year wait for Astrid and Iris to see a paediatrician, and I got my MP involved and sent a formal complaint because it was already fairly obvious that they had a disability of some description. They don't typically present as cerebral palsy, by the way, because it's just hypertonia, the muscle weakness. They don't have the spasticity. But no, it was me that pushed it. It was me that said, I'm concerned about. It was me that took them to the GP to say, my kid's eyes are looking in different directions and I want a referral. The referral was refused. I had to go private. And both, if you've seen pictures of the girls, both Astrid and Iris need glasses. It was absolutely me. And I think that's what my concern is, really, is that I was the one that pushed it. I was the one that noticed and recognised that there were some difficulties and challenges. For every one person that notices it, I'm sure there's lots of people that notice it, but are told that they're making a fuss, or, children develop differently, or lots of parents that may not notice, because if it's your first child or even second child, then you don't really, sometimes some of the difficulties can be quite subtle as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that early intervention coming, from a special school background where we do take children within the early years. And it's very clear to see that the children who have early intervention, the progress that they make and the rate in which they develop, compared to children who might not have that early intervention is really key. So it sounds like you had a bit of a battle with the health professionals in order to even be seen and get those referrals.
A huge amount. I can't tell you how stressful and difficult it has been to kind of get them the support that they need. And actually, they don't get speech and language therapy. They don't get physiotherapy either, despite the fact they've both got educational healthcare plans which indicate that they should get it. What they do is I take them to a charity called Step and Learn, which is conductive education, which is, I'm not an expert in it, but a mixture of physio and OT, which has been incredibly supportive for early intervention and support, and has made a huge difference to their stability, their muscle tone, and so on. If I were to compare that to Zelda, for example, though, she is a 16-month-old girl that has never eaten, and I've been told it's a year wait for the Evelina feeding clinic. So she will be over 2 and would have never eaten food. And she's been discharged from speech and language therapy for a child that has never eaten food and has gross developmental delay. And someone's put in the chat, I've been let down by the NHS. I love the NHS, but my children have been disgustingly let down by the NHS. I can't even express how difficult it's been.
And I am really sorry to hear that they've had that, and that, it's how very fortunate that they've got you advocating for them. So when it comes to the sort of send code of practice and early years, the Children and Families Act, the 2014, it says that local authorities should have a local offer and early intervention should be there with health visitors, SALT, portage, education psychology, and all of that. That the Children and Families Act is enshrined in law. And I think one of the things that always disappoints me is that with EYFS, very often they say that EHCPs aren't necessary because those needs could be met through sort of a Section 17, which is children in need. But from your point of view, how did you go about getting the education and healthcare plans? Was that a needs assessment that you instigated as a parent, or did the girls have any form of nursery and childcare setting that supported that process?
So the nursery have been incredibly supportive of Astrid and Iris, and even Zelda, who's not with them yet. I initiated it for Astrid and Iris. The assessment was initially the request to assess was initially declined. I sent a message to the head of children's services, and we had mediation the next few days. And I have a friend that's and they obviously just said absolutely they meet the threshold for an assessment. And then they were issued an educational healthcare plan. So for me, there were some elements of that which I had to push and push and push, I would say, but they were already at nursery as well. Zelda, I've made a request for an assessment for an educational healthcare plan, and that's been refused. I've sent a message to the head of children's services, but it's been ignored, unfortunately. So I have completed the documentation for a tribunal, which we will obviously win because she has quite significant needs. And I think their argument, their refusal to assess, I think was illegal as well, because they said that the nursery can assess when she starts in September. She would need one-to-one when she goes to nursery. She's probably special appropriate. And it's those frustrations, and they're continual. And it's unfortunate that Kent County Council haven't kind of learned from their experiences, and it's a waste of everybody's time. And it's difficult for parents. I'm trying to juggle. I've had 3 medical appointments today for my children. That's fairly standard. I might have 5 or 6 medical appointments a week for my children, and having to kind of then go through the process of a tribunal or argues or debates and so on it takes me away from the task at hand, which is being a mum, or being someone who works and is in education and really enjoys it. But I
And when
keep
we,
on.
yeah, and when we think about that, so there's some really interesting points I want to come back to there. So where is the identity of Sarah in this? So you were previously, I know, sort of self-employed in consultancy now, but previously have had jobs in all different sort of areas of the education sector. Was your decision to go sort of freelance and consultancy, was that influenced by trying to balance the parenting with a professional career?
No, I'd already gone on to consultancy several years before, getting pregnant. So that was already in action. And actually, I've continued to work throughout. I was working in Redbridge as the head of behaviour and inclusion, and I've recently started working in Southend with the kind of view that I will need to have the versatility to be able to take my children to physio. And I'm sure my manager won't mind me saying this, but she's been fantastic and supportive. And actually, she was my manager in Redbridge as well, and now in Southend. But it does give me that versatility. But I did have to, I do work for free as well, so I do a lot of voluntary work. I'm the president of the national organisation Prusac, the DfE stakeholder groups, for example, is just part of my function as the president of Prusac. And for those meetings that I don't get paid, you might have Zelda sitting on my lap joining those meetings, because that's that balance. And at the same time, I've still published books. I've been asked to write another book, so I'm sorting out that proposal. Work is incredibly important to me. I really enjoy working with children, and I kind of want to make, this sounds a bit grand, doesn't it? I do want to make the world a better place for children. I want children to have a similar experience that what I had at school, which was a place of safety and wonderfulness. And I want to give that to other children.
No, that's great. And I think what's really heartening to see, and for, I'm a mother too, and we are both blessed because parenting and motherhood is a gift. And I know that there are some people that unfortunately are never blessed to be able to experience that might want to.
Absolutely.
So I do understand that, but I think the fact that your girls have got an exceptional role model of, and you are somebody that shows that it is possible with the right support network of friends, family, and employers. It is possible to have it all.
You can. I think things give. I think things do give. And I'm sure, you know, I think it could be hard work, and I wish I had more time. I've not been swimming for months and months and months, and I love swimming. And it's those kind of things that you miss out on, because I think you have to prioritize, and there's different priorities, and my priorities are first and foremost it's the medical attention that my children need, and then kind of things go below that. And absolutely, I think I am blessed to have children, and I'm not religious, but I do have this idea that my children were given to me because I'm the best mum for them. And I will do my best, because I think that's really important, that I advocate on their behalf, but make sure that their voice is heard and they get all the early intervention as well. But I couldn't do that without the network of support. And my husband's not even in the same room as me, but I couldn't do it without the support of my husband. But also my older daughter as well has been incredible. Her life has been changed upside down by having siblings when she was an only child, all of a sudden millions of them, then children with disabilities, which is kind of by the by for her, to be honest. She's not bothered by that at all. But you've got to have a kind of network of support, because otherwise you can get very isolated, very lonely, but also frustrated. And again, not because my children have disabilities, but because the arguments and debates with those external to get their needs met. I wouldn't change my children at all. I think they're wonderful. Would I change the system around them to wrap them up better and support them? Absolutely, I would.
Well, Coaching Head Teachers, who's listening in tonight, has said, that you are an inspiration, and that
Oh,
she, like many others, have followed you throughout pregnancy and in that fighting and advocating for the girls. Because I know that pregnancy wasn't always easy, was it? You had some real tricky stages throughout
I
pregnancy, didn't you?
I don't think it's I was on the verge of heart failure. I was so unwell. So I had blood transfusions and I was in a wheelchair. Yeah, I was incredibly unwell. Um, I I wasn't allowed to go to work, and I had to have my husband as a chaperone if I went out and about, because I was still trying to do. I worked throughout. I worked. I literally. I went into labour a day early on each occasion, and I sent a message to my boss to go, look, I can't do my handing over meeting because I'm in labour at the moment. And things like that. So I worked throughout, but yeah, it wasn't very. I wasn't very well. I probably didn't function as well as I perhaps could.
Oh, well, going back to the diagnosis of cerebral palsy, you've shared with us that you were fortunate enough that you've had some experience, so you were able to make those initial observations and champion and request and advocate and actually go into battle to get the girls what they deserve and need. But thinking about families who are going through that right from the beginning, I know that you've shared with us tonight a resource of things that they might need to consider. So things about like the walkers, about the MRIs, what key things and reassurances with families just about to start this process would you like to share with us this evening?
I think one thing to share is I can't remember who criticised this a few weeks ago. I don't know. Facebook groups I think are really powerful, um, and there's lots of different Facebook groups that I think can really support parents that aren't sure what's going on or want a bit more kind of help. There's a cerebral palsy one, for example, that I'm a member of, and there's adults and children, or adults and parents of children, and they share some of the dilemmas and sharing ideas of really simple things like potty training, for example. Potties are too low for my girls to be able to stand up from, and someone just suggested a slightly different potty. Really helpful, really helpful. Those sorts of things. Um, it might be potentially that my girls have a syndrome, all three of them, because of their disabilities. We're not sure, but there's a Facebook group called SWAN, which means Syndrome Without a Name, has been inordinately helpful. But also things like Send Reform England, really helpful about the processes of special educational needs. And I would say there's some great advocates on Twitter as well who have been there, they've done it, they understand, and they will offer you advice. There's loads of amazing people out there who have been invaluable, because whilst I never consider myself an expert, I just think I have experiences. Um, but some of these people I would absolutely say are experts. They're amazing, and they really want to make the world a better place as well. So I would say, I hate this phrase, but reach out and try and contact people that maybe have similar experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the parental support that groups can offer each other, because it is your lived experience, isn't it? I certainly know from our point of view as a special school, we've just recently been on a residential, and we interestingly we had an individual there who has a diagnosis, and we're there and it's just 48 hours of our time, whereas it
Mm.
is your life day in day out, 24/7. And if somebody out there has lived it and breathed it and got some of those top tips, then I think, yeah, definitely worth sharing. So everybody do check out those groups that Sarah has shared and mentioned with us. I'm not wishing to put you on the spot, Sarah, because I don't expect you to remember this, but is there any particular people on Twitter, or X as it now is, that you want to draw listeners' attention to if they're interested in finding out about more with additional needs or with cerebral palsy? Are there any accounts that you particularly want to give a shout out to?
There was when I was talking, one person, I don't know, I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, is Kimberly Turner. Um, she's great. She's a real passionate advocate. She's amazing. Just there's so many, and so many people have messaged me. So now I'm going to just literally just look at my messages, which is again, really poor radio, isn't it? There is just so many just wonderful people. A, a gentleman called Steve Hui, who's lovely. I probably pronounced his surname in a terrible, terrible way. Um, there's just millions of people. They're just Elise Holly Hayward is amazing. She uses eye gaze technology. She's absolutely fabulous. And she's
Oh,
got cerebral palsy. Like
she does.
she's
Yeah.
just great, isn't she? She's just absolutely great.
And just to give her a bit of a shout out, so that was probably one of my first experiences, because for me, equality, inclusion, diversity, really important, and it's about, you can't be what you can't see, and representation does really matter. And in my former school where I was head, I'd stumbled across Elise, and I'd seen her. She hadn't really done many talks at that particular
No,
point. And it certainly wasn't her career and her job at that point. It was just right at the beginning stages. And I just thought, do you know what? Our staff need to listen to you, because it's actually you that will get through to them more than any amount of
mm,
training I could provide or give to them. So I asked her whether she'd be willing to do that. And she joined us on a staff meeting where,
oh,
with her
lovely,
pre-speech, which was lovely. And the staff, the impact that it had, because it was the fact that we did have some children who had diagnosis, and they said, there's so much in there that actually she was able to then articulate because of the communication tools that she had. And actually, what else can we do? Have we explored everything enough? Is there any of ours that could be eligible for eye gaze and have that movement that they could use? So she was absolutely inspirational. And I know the trust then booked her
amazing.
for a trust wide session, and I know her session was full at that. So, and it's been great actually to see her career go from strength to strength. I know she's on half term this week, and she finds she's missing the talks. But yeah, not long ago she was in Parliament herself. So a
She
really,
was, yeah.
a really great role model, definitely.
And I've just some people have asked some names. And I also remembered Tourette's Hero. I've got Tourette's syndrome as well, so I know Tourette's Hero from my other world. But she's been incredible too. She sent me. I know it sounds silly, but she sent me. I think one of the things about having disabled children, let alone disabled children, is the ability to organise yourself. She sent me a laminator, cards, little booklets in order she'd made picture exchange communication cards for me, but also gave me the means in terms of a laminator and so on, and even little laminator, whatever you call them, little things, plastic things, to make communication cards for my daughters. And isn't that amazing? Like, but someone that I think I've only met her once, maybe, I can't remember, but just had that kindness to just send me bits to help me out. And she sent me some books as well that she thought my daughters would be interested in, because it had images of people with disabilities and so on. And it's those little touches, just amazing, just absolutely phenomenal. And Twitter can be, or X as we should call it, can be a really quite a grumpy place, can't it? But actually, there's so many moments that remind me of how wonderful people can be. And so I just want to kind of say thank you. And I've probably not mentioned so many different people who have been fantastic. So I apologise to you all. But people have been really kind, and people without experiences of children with disability have been amazing. The amount of people sharing and watching it click over to 10,000 people, the Blue Badge petition, was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Oh, well, I remember some people going to going to bed and then waking up and clicking on it to see what it was the morning, and oh
Yeah,
wow, look where we've got to now. I think Talk for Teaching was one of those, and yeah,
yeah,
it was great to get it over the 10,000 mark. And I know in our chat, one of the education professionals, I think it's head teacher of Meadowbank, she talked about whether schools should be applying for blue badges for some of their students, and I know that from your feedback tonight, it's something that they're then going to go and follow up with the
yes,
local authority, because I just think about my own school in this, well, it's not mine, but our school, in the sense that, we have over 70 individuals who have equipment to help them with mobility. So
Yeah.
if you're going out on a school trip, just like you and your family, it's not a case of a mainstream school, they just book a coach and that's it, a 52 seater, we fill it up and off we go. All go out as a class. Well, actually, the class might have 12 wheelchair users, and you can't just book a minibus. There's a lot
Mm.
of additional costs and a lot of additional planning and things that need to go for that. And how kind and wonderful that people on Twitter and X have come forward with resources. Kindness, it does cost nothing, and I think those little touches, it really does make a difference.
I can't agree more. I just think people have been really kind, and even what you were saying about being part of the journey, almost from kind of pregnancy of an older mum, pregnancy, being very, very poorly but still doing my work, and then my children were born and they have disabilities, but still being there has been wonderful. And there's lots of people that are maybe not so obvious, but they message me, and maybe people that we wouldn't necessarily anticipate being ever so kind, but have just been fantastic.
So thinking about now the future and role models and representation matters. So I'm thinking about some individuals now who have diagnosis of cerebral palsy, and then there might be people that we know, we're familiar with. So I'm just going to sort of name and mention a few of them. So there's Christy Brown, who was I think he's Irish, but he was the artist who, with his left foot, because he didn't have any motor control of his hands, actually he became the artist to diagnosis and used his left foot. And then Breaking Bad, not that I'm advocating
Yes.
for some of the content of Breaking Bad, and
It's fine. We're old enough to watch it. It's okay.
Yeah, we're old enough to watch it. But again, you've got the character Walter Jr., and he, was a character with cerebral palsy. Some of the comedians.
I think the actor has cerebral palsy as
Yeah,
well.
it's the actor. Yeah, it is. It's the actor.
RJ Mitz. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, Roy Frank, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, Roy Frank. Yes, yeah. So I know that he's done lots of other things, but I think Breaking Bad. And I know that actually I think he was about 3. I did a bit of research on him, and he had leg braces and crutches for most of his childhood. Yeah, and then didn't then need them. And I know that he, is a prominent voice in the awareness, and he does speak out at the Screen Actors Guild, etc. Now, just to get your views, there are some comedians who also have diagnosis. There's a variety of them. So I think Rosie Jones, Francesca Martinez,
Yes.
and then there's an American one, Josh Blue, and he talks about being really self-deprecating about his condition. And I just wondered, what are your views on that, in making humour and comedy from the diagnosis?
I think, well, people ask me the same with the diagnosis of having Tourette syndrome and whether or not you can laugh at X, Y, Z. I think it's up to the individual with that particular need to make that call and decision. It's certainly not up for me to make a decision for someone else. I suppose I would say that everything is contextual, and I do think there's harmful language around cerebral palsy that has been shared. I think on Rosie Jones's comedy show in regards to spasticity, which is the tightness of muscles, and obviously that's been shortened as an insult to people with disabilities. Now, I find that not just uncomfortable, I don't like to hear it. It's just fine. But then at the same time, as someone who doesn't have that disability, is it up to me to make a decision about what someone else finds acceptable to use? Probably not. I don't like it. I think, well, a kid the other day used a phrase, and I had a chat with them about the appropriateness and gave them a bit of a kind of, this is what it means and this is where it comes from. But I mean, I don't know Josh Blue because, I live in the 1990s in my head, so I only know comedians from the 1990s, really. I'm sure he's funny, but I don't know enough about him. But it's also not my decision to make, if that makes sense. I'd probably, if it was a question about Tourette's, for example, I could say I could talk more to that because that's my disability. Cerebral palsy is my children's disability, so I can just advocate on their behalf, but it would be their decision about what they find funny and not, as the case may be.
Yeah. And as one of our guests this evening who's listening has said to us that, some people might use it as a coping mechanism and it's a way to express themselves, and raising awareness of conditions using humour is a tactic that they use.
Yeah, and I think, it'd be good if we lived in a world where people raise awareness without being self-deprecating. But then there's also this idea of playful acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, isn't there? That idea of pacing, and that might fit within that remit as well, that kind of playfulness about disability. And there's lots, I've got friends with disabilities, and my view is that they would make the decision and lead the way about what they feel comfortable with. But what I wouldn't want people to do is to be self-deprecating to make me feel more comfortable about their disability. I think that would be concerning.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we think and wrap up about the future of Astrid, Iris, and Zelda, we're going to take a listen now to our sponsors of the show, and then we'll come back to you for our final remarks.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Siddiqui, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, fluency expert Tim Rosinski, EEF specialist Chloe Butlin, the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton, and a range of experienced practitioners, including MATS leaders, deputy heads, heads of English, high-level teaching assistants, and school librarians. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.co.uk for more information and to sign up for this free conference.
Oh, well, thanks to our sponsors there. So we're just about to wrap up now. But before we do, just want to give a huge shout out and thanks to Sarah for joining us this evening. So joined us mostly from a personal perspective, but again is a highly esteemed educationalist as well of over 20 years experience. And tonight we've been sharing the journey of Astrid and Iris in their battle, and now Zelda, in their battle for getting a blue badge, which sadly isn't going to be for them, but how Sarah has taken that and channeled a national campaign so that the rules around those under 3 years old can be revisited by Parliament. So although Parliament has now broken, the fact that we've got over 10,000 signatures and it's never too late to sign, we will politely request that the new government definitely makes it a debate that is had in Parliament, because for early years, we need equality in the early years and we need early intervention so that young people like Astrid, Iris and Zelda can be fully functioning members of their community with equitable access to things like their swimming pools, their parks, their shopping centres. So as we finish then, Sarah, what final words from you? What are your hopes for the future for the girls?
I think the same as Octavia, that they're happy, they're healthy, they enjoy the world around them. I think that's it. Like, that's it. That's all I want for my kids. Happy, healthy, enjoy the world, experience it, love it.
Oh, and I think that's what all of our listeners out there would want too. So, want to give a shout out as well to the listeners that have joined us live. So, I think we've had Tom Rogers, I think we've had Nikki, I think we've had a coaching head teacher, and I think we've had some earlier on in the evening. But a final thank you, Sarah. Thanks for joining, and
Pleasure.
best of luck for the future.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.